So the following is going to be a demo of a tool that we can use in mentoring and coaching called Perceptual Positions. This can be really useful when we're trying to understand what's going on in terms of the dynamics in a relationship. So this could be a work relationship or a home relationship. And often it's useful if we're just reaching a bit of a stalemate in terms of discussing something or resolving something. So Nat and I are going to do the demo and just give you a sort of a taster for this, and hopefully it will be useful in your practice. So Nat, last
Fine.
time we met, you were telling me about something that was going on with work that you wanted to explore. Just give me a little bit of an update on the situation.
Sure. Well, I'd recently come into a slightly difficult situation with a colleague of mine who I've worked with for a while. I got on well with her, but actually, I noticed that she's ordering inappropriate investigations. Not terribly inappropriate, but they're just not fitting protocol. And the problem with that is I have to order them on her behalf. So she'll come and sort of ask me to order them, and I sort of feel a moment where I think, oh, really, we shouldn't be doing that one. I've not particularly challenged it, but it's now reached the stage where probably I do need to say something, and I just feel a bit uncomfortable about it. I thought it might be helpful just to talk it through a little bit just before I say anything.
Okay, okay. So there is an exercise that we can use to kind of explore what's going on here between you and your colleague in a bit more depth. It's an exercise that involves moving around a bit. So I'm going to
Okay.
ask you to kind of change position, and you'll move physically into three different positions. The
Okay.
first position is going to be yourself. So you're going to just be yourself, and I'm going to direct some questions to you as if you were like having a conversation with this colleague, but I'll be asking you your perspective. Then I'll ask you to shake off that position and to sit yourself in your colleague's position, and you will
Mhm.
sit as if you were her, and take on her persona. And I will ask you questions from a position of her. So in that
Okay.
phase, I'll talk to you as if you are her. And then the third position is an objective observer, somebody watching the conversations or the interactions between you and your colleague play out. And you'll adopt that position, and I'll ask you some questions from that position. Once we've done all three positions, there'll be just a quick debrief on the exercise. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem.
And then practically, have you got sort of three places that you can sit that are a little bit
Yeah, I
different?
might have to
Yeah.
jump over the dog.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if I can see you or can't see you. What I
Okay.
tend to do is I actually move positions slightly as well, just to
Okay.
mirror what you're doing. And I won't be staring at you, so you'll feel kind of maybe less uncomfortable moving around. I'll
Okay.
turn sideways on, and we'll see how we go.
Sure. Okay, let's give it a
Okay,
go.
brilliant. So first of all, I'm just going to invite you, first of all, just stand up and then sit down as yourself, as Nat, but we're going to be imagining that you're actually in a room with your colleagues. So maybe imagining being at work. So if you just sit yourself down in a
Okay.
position that feels comfortable and turn as if you were looking towards your colleague. So just taking a moment to kind of just get ready and imagine you're interacting with her. Um, So imagine she's sitting as she would sit, wearing the clothes that she would wear. Notice her facial expression. Notice her posture. So just notice how she sits. And also just bring to mind her tone of voice, maybe the words she tends to use. And just imagine that you're in the environment where you would normally be interacting with each other. So just bringing to awareness the kind of the sights, the sounds, and the smells of the place where you would normally interact. So now, as you're looking at your colleague, what are you seeing?
Um, I'm seeing a face and a person that I know pretty well. Somebody I'm fond of. I have positive emotions as I look at her. She looks smart and she looks appropriate for work, and actually she looks sort of fairly neutral. She doesn't really know there's a problem, particularly, I don't think. And her normal demeanor is fairly friendly. And approachable. Being in the same room with her is, you know, it feels okay. I maybe look at her slightly and think, or it comes to mind this issue, and I wonder how she's going to take the issue. But for now, she seems okay. She seems pretty level and normal to me.
Mhm. So I'm going to invite you to imagine that you're just starting to maybe bring up this issue, and you've mentioned to her that you'd like to talk to her about the issue of the investigations and the protocols. Um, as you mention it to her, what are you hearing from her?
I can imagine initially, as I was kind of explaining it to her, she would kind of be listening really intently because she's kind of realized that maybe this is, there's a problem. Um, and then actually, I can probably see her initial reaction being one of feeling a bit surprised, maybe, and maybe a bit sad, um, a bit upset that this that this is a problem and that I'm having to speak to her about it. Um, I'm trying to think if I could imagine her becoming angry or defensive. I don't think so. She's normally quite a level sort of person, but I can imagine her feeling sad about it.
Mhm.
So I can just imagine her kind of face watching me explain and sort of hanging on to things, and then sort of some sort of expression of feeling in reaction to that afterwards.
Mhm. And what do you hear yourself saying to her?
Um, I think I'd like it to be more like that, I suppose. I wouldn't, I would want to try to avoid her having to feel really defensive or cross or upset. And I suppose my hope would be that the way I communicate would be, it wouldn't be really emotional. It would try not to be personal. It would be more focused on the protocol and maybe just a slight deviance from protocol, and maybe we all do that a little bit, but probably, there's just an element of needing to tighten that up. So maybe trying to approach it in an emotionally neutral way, explain it well and be clear, but try to avoid anything too strong or too shocking for her.
Mhm. And as you're having this conversation, what is she trying to do?
I think at the beginning she'd be trying to kind of think about it, like with all of us, if you're kind of caught with a sort of, you know, a problem, then you immediately start to think of, well, when did that happen, and what was the outcome, and have I done it before, and who's raised this? So I could imagine her kind of mind going through the whys and wherefores of it to begin with. And then, but hopefully I can then kind of give her a few examples, maybe bring the protocol up to show her this is actually what's recommended and why. Um, so that then from that then sort of fills that gap in terms of what the information is that she needs to have, and then hopefully we can move through into more of a constructive different way of doing things, and then maybe how I could support her in doing that if needed, or give her advice on how I bridge these protocols when sometimes it is difficult to not have these tests. um yeah, and hopefully it would just be a conversation that's a sort of exchange of information. I wouldn't be surprised if she took it a little bit personally, but hopefully my hope would be to be able to manage it to avoid too much upset for her, that we can both stay as sort of grown-ups, adult conversation, find positive strategies, and then find a positive way forward.
Mhm. Okay. And what assumptions are you making?
Um, I'm making assumptions that she will cope with it okay. I suppose worst case scenario is she might get really upset and angry and defensive, and regardless of what I say. Um, I'm also assuming that she'll kind of feel um sad or regret about it. Whereas some people don't see there's a problem if you point it out. So I'm kind of assuming that she would also identify the problem once it was shown to her. That might be tricky if she can't see that there's a problem.
Mhm. What are you noticing about your own feelings about the situation?
I think as I described those different sort of scenarios and my hopes for that conversation, it helps me to think about how I might approach the words and the tone and the whole sort of setup of that conversation, and how actually probably I have quite a big responsibility in that to bring a really constructive conversation to bear, or to give her the opportunity to have that conversation, and some care and consideration from my side beforehand may help that. I can't control completely how she'll react, but it may help to bring about that ideal scenario. Probably also thinking about it, it would be helpful to prepare if she does get, if it's the worst case scenario and she does get really upset and defensive or can't see there's a problem, that I also have thought of things to say in that situation.
Mhm, mhm.
But
And
I
what?
also feel hopeful that
Mhm,
maybe
mhm,
we can have this conversation and it can be two grown-ups. And I suppose I'm thinking my priority is not to damage our relationship,
mhm,
which is a high value for me. And I really like her as a colleague and as a sort of friend at work. I don't want to jeopardize that. So I suppose that's why I'm thinking, considering this conversation more.
mhm,
Um, but I'm also hopeful, after thinking about being in this situation, that that could be possible.
mhm. And ultimately, what do you want as an outcome?
Yeah, just simply an acknowledgement of a practice that's just slipped off being ideal, a plan to get that back on track, a kind of admission of, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I realized I've gone a bit off track, but then this, but almost a restoration of the friendship that's like, thanks for mentioning it. I know you're supporting me through this, and it almost be a positive thing within the friendship that we could have both been vulnerable in this situation and take that forward, compared with avoiding something or not talking about it. And I actually believe these sort of conversations can actually strengthen relationships positively if they're done well. So that would be my hope for the outcome.
Mhm. Okay. So I'm going to invite you now, Nat, just to stand up and shake off yourself
Okay.
and then change position. And can you give me a kind of pseudonym for your colleague?
Yeah, let's call her F.
Okay, so F. So when you sit down or when you reposition yourself, just sit as F would sit, and I will start talking to you as
Okay.
F. I will call you F, and I will ask you questions as F.
Okay.
So just get yourself into position. So you're wearing F's clothes, you're sitting how she sits, you'll adopt her kind of tone of voice, her facial expression. So you are now F and you're looking over at your colleague Nat. So,
Okay.
and just as you're there, just think about what's important to you, F. What excites you? What motivates you? Just spend a moment just contemplating that. What's important to you? What excites you? What motivates you? So, as you're looking at your colleague Nat, what's important to you?
Um, I think have a good relationship with Nat.
Hmm.
Um, Clinically, she's my senior, and usually we work together really well. And we also get on well. I feel like I have her respect. I feel like she thinks what I do is good.
Hmm.
I've never had any complaints from her, and we seem to work well together. So as I look at her, I feel positive about being in the room with her.
Hmm. And in terms of the processes used for investigations and following protocols, what do you want to achieve?
Um, I want to. I don't want to stand out as a person that isn't following protocol or needs to do investigations unnecessarily. Um, it's hard for me to know if that's something I'm doing and that I'm aware of it, or whether it's just something I'm not aware of. But either way, I think I'd be upset to realize that my practice was different from others. And I also think I'd be really sort of shamed with Nat because I feel like she might lose respect in me as a clinician.
Mhm. And just thinking about being in work and working with Nat, what's going on for you at the moment?
So usually we work fairly independently, and I pride myself on being a good independent practitioner. But just occasionally we do have to work together. And usually, whatever I request, Nat doesn't question it. She kind of trusts me and does what I ask, which I appreciate. Um, so I feel like currently our working relationship is good. I don't have any doubts that she doesn't think I'm doing a good job
Mhm.
previously.
Mhm. And tell me about Nat. How do you feel about her in general?
Um, yeah, I feel really positive about her. We do quite a lot of shifts together. I'm pleased to realise when I'm on a shift with her, I find her really approachable. I don't feel threatened or defensive in coming to her. Um, and I feel like we're fairly mutual in terms of our clinical reasoning, so we can have kind of good sort of mutual chats about making decisions about patients or talking about how things ended up, which are good and interesting. And I feel like as an equal colleague with her in that sort of respect, and I value that aspect to our friendship relationship.
Mhm. And with Nat being your senior, if she needs to give you any sort of developmental feedback on your work, how could she be effective in doing that?
Um, I think I say these things about our relationship, and I assume that she feels the same way. I think it would upset me if I realised that she didn't think I was a good clinician, or she didn't think I was capable or trustworthy. So I'd appreciate her handling any feedback really kind of sensitively, um, and maybe acknowledging the positives about her side of things, which hopefully are similar to how I feel about how we do work together, how the vast majority of the decisions I make are sound and good, and how she does trust me and respect me. I think
Mhm.
probably if I heard that at the same time,
Mhm.
it might land a bit better.
Mhm. And how do you learn best?
I'm fairly new in my career, so I'm learning kind of on the job. So
Mhm.
it is this kind of dynamic feedback that would be a situation where I might learn. Um, and this sort of situation helps me more than being pulled into an office with a manager or being shown data on um, how my figures don't add up compared with other people. I think I'd respond better to this from a fellow clinician, um, with maybe their understanding of sometimes the situation being difficult. But I think any kind of feedback is hard, so it would still be hard. I could class it as a learning event, but I think because it's potentially a little bit critical, it's still hard to hear.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things. In hindsight, it does help you be a better clinician in the long run.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. What's the impact on you if your relationship with Nat isn't successful or going smoothly?
Yeah, that would be hard because we do have to work together and we do have to discuss cases and make decisions together. So if I didn't feel like I could approach her in the same way, that would be difficult. It wouldn't be impossible. We could probably just rub along together, but it would make things a bit awkward.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. And how would you like to continue learning from Nat as your senior?
Um, I do respect her as a clinician, and she's got a lot of experience. So I think just realizing that I can learn from her and to be open to that, which I think I have been up to now, just in terms of mutual learning over cases, but to continue doing that and not to feel threatened, or I suppose there's a situation where I might then not bring up a question or a query because I would feel that that would add to the negative feeling she might have for me, and I want to avoid that. I still want to be able to discuss cases with her and be vulnerable about things I don't know. So that
Mm-hmm.
would be my ideal, I think, to continue learning in that respect without there being any judgment or hangover from this issue.
Okay. And is there anything else that you need to say to Nat so she has a better understanding of you?
Um, no, only that the previous place I worked at did have different protocols. So we did tend to investigate more than at this current company. So it's
Mhm.
not an excuse, but I think sometimes it's harder to then not rely on pathways and protocols that you've maybe got used to using and I'm
Mhm.
more comfortable with using. So I might just explain that to her in this situation. It
Mm.
doesn't mean that I can't change, but it's just acknowledging why it's maybe been a bit harder for me.
Okay, great. So I'm going to invite you to stand up and just shake off F.
Okay.
And now sit yourself down in a third
Oh
position.
yeah. Okay.
And this third position is an objective observer. So you're not F, you're not Nat, you're just someone, maybe a systems expert, a workplace expert who's been invited in just to come and see, what's going on, observing the work colleagues, see how things are going. So from this position, imagine that you're just sort of almost like a fly on the wall in the situation, and you're just observing the kind of day to day. You're seeing how Nat and F are interacting with each other. And your remit is just to kind of bring that objectivity and notice what's happening in terms of workflow, relationship, etc.
Okay.
So, as you're looking at things playing out, what are you noticing about Nat and about F as they're interacting together?
I can see that they are pretty comfortable with each other. I think F is maybe a little bit cautious because there's this meeting been kind of called and she doesn't quite know what it's about. And we always assume that it's something negative, don't we? So, but I can see that they're generally quite comfortable with each other and um, there's a feeling of kind of expectation that something's going to happen, but that they're both positively sort of engaged in it.
Hmm. And this might sound like a bit of an odd question, but if they were both animals, what animals would they be coming together?
Um, oh yeah, that's a good one. I think maybe just say like a mummy cow and then like an adolescent calf. So
Mhm.
the same animal, but just sort of at slightly different stages. So
Mm.
the mummy cow is caring and wants the best for her calf. But maybe the calf just needs a little bit of guidance, but they have mutual respect and love. And they're both invested in their relationship, and the relationship will continue afterwards because they are mother and son or whatever. But just that the calf maybe needs a bit more, a little nudge, a little bit of guidance in terms of the activity or the issue.
Mm. Okay. So you're now observing them start to talk about this issue around investigations. What word would you use to describe each of their behaviours in the conversation?
Um, I think initially F is a little guarded.
Hmm.
I can see that Nat is being sensitive, careful, cautious, just at the sort of opening of that conversation.
Hmm. And how are these behaviours reinforcing each other?
Um, I can see that Nat is trying to disarm F in terms of she's trying to help her be less guarded. She's saying things like, you know, there's something to be said, and we need to debrief this, but please let it be known that you're a good clinician and I respect your decisions, and you know, you have these positive attributes in the job, as a sort of as a sort of starter, so that even though, but there's still this thing to be discussed, and hope, and you can see that sensitivity and caution at the beginning hopefully helps F to feel sort of less guarded. You can maybe see her guard coming down a little bit as she realizes, yeah, okay, maybe there's something to be said, but there's a lot of positive stuff as well.
And what's not being said?
Um, it's not sounding like a management chat or a script. It's not sort of telling off. It's not, yeah, it doesn't sound contrived or ill judged. It sounds like it's coming from the right place.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. What advice would you give to them both to have more of an impact on each other in this conversation?
Um, Not to make assumptions, to listen to both sides. So F needs to really listen about what's being said in terms of maybe what the problem is, and not to assume more. But equally, Nat needs to listen to how F's responding, to really try and understand what's behind what's been going on, because there may be some things that Nat just isn't aware of or hasn't appreciated in the mix of this.
Mhm. And what do you think's at stake if this isn't resolved?
Um, in the room, I think their relationship, or it just could be more difficult to work together. I don't think it would be impossible, but it would be more tricky, at least initially. Um, that might have to lead to further conversations. Bigger picture, if F doesn't follow protocol, then it could become a kind of a work issue, a competence issue. That obviously we want to, it isn't ideal at all. So whilst Nat isn't giving sort of a stick, actually, if F says there's not a problem and I'm going to carry on working as I'm working, then that could create a problem for the organisation, because the protocols aren't being followed.
Mhm. What advice would you give to Nat to obtain that good balance between sensitive, supportive conversation, but also making effective change?
I think it's always trying to remember the person behind the behaviour. Um, I think it was interesting, to try to imagine how F might be feeling about it, and to understand why she might be feeling those things, and that, so Nat doesn't want to sort of lose that. And sometimes if you're going in with quite a strong agenda, you forget to listen or stop or pause or change tack if things aren't going like you thought, because you feel nervous about delivering your own agenda. So just to try and to hold back on the agenda, all the way through as needed, but not to avoid having this chat and not to avoid saying these things, and realizing that actually change does need to happen, but the way it's communicated here is key.
Mm. Okay. So I'm going to invite you just to stand up and shake off the objective observer.
Okay, go
Sit
back
back
to
down.
CA.
Go back to being Nat again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just debrief the exercise now. What's emerged for you from just adopting those different positions?
Yeah, it just really helps you to be more empathetic, I think. You know, seeing the person as a problem, or seeing the situation as something that's difficult, and that you've been told that you've got to sort it out. So many kind of negative connotations with the whole thing. This person is a problem, what they're doing is a problem, you've got to sort it out. It just feels really heavy, and emotive. Whereas when you go through this, I mean, it's still something, a conversation you'd probably rather not have, but I can sort of start to push into maybe this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity maybe relationally. It's an opportunity maybe for me to be vulnerable even and say, do you know what? Sometimes I do this investigation in this situation, and that's not the protocol, and I need to be better at it too. And just for it to maybe be a bit more mutual, it's also an opportunity to give this lady some strokes that I've never said to her. So I said all those positive things about her at the start. I've never actually said those things to her face. It might feel a bit like I'm only saying them because I'm giving the negative, but hopefully if that's said well, it's an opportunity to sort of give a colleague some strokes and to put some wind in their sails at the same time. And then I think as well, just that thing at the end in terms of offering them support and this not just being one conversation and then you're out of there, it's like, okay, how can we help? And then, that being an ongoing thing that then, again, that builds the relationship. So I think I just see the whole thing as less of a problem. This person isn't a problem, and just that's from maybe just appreciating a bit more where she's sitting, what she's feeling about it all.
Mhm. Okay. And from the position of Nat at the start, you expressed this kind of sense of hope. How hopeful are you now that you'll be able to have these conversations and resolve the issue?
Yeah, really hopeful. I'm really motivated now. Well, much more motivated to have that conversation because I feel like I want to do it well. And actually, having put this thought in, I'm probably the best person to do that and to do it well. Um, and the bit I can't control, then fine. But yeah, I do feel optimistic that like having thought about our relationship and all the good stuff that's there already, and neither of us wanting to jeopardize that hopefully that's enough to kind of engage us both to bring about a positive outcome and to walk away with our relationship intact, maybe even deeper.
Okay, great. So just to sort of bring this to a bit of a focus for some action to take forward, I'm just going to ask you to write some sentences just to close this, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
So on the back of all the thinking you've done around this issue, this relationship, and this particular issue around the investigations,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to complete three sentences. The first one is, I want to, and then complete that. The
Yeah.
second is, I can.
Yeah.
And the third sentence is, I will. So just complete each of those.
Okay. I want to um, have a positive conversation with F. I can do my best to make that as constructive as possible. I will prioritize F as a person and our relationship ongoing. I want to have a positive conversation with F. I can do my best to make that conversation as possible, as constructive as possible. I will prioritize F as a person and prioritize our relationship ongoing.
Great, great. Okay. All the best with that, Nat. We'll finish
Thanks
the
very
survey
much.
now.
Thank you, Katie.
Cheers. Bye.